Call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First item on our agenda is for the approval of minutes. Our meeting from May 20th. Went over some old business. Sherman Hill Road, two-family. We had a resolution classifying the action, referring the application to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development. That resolution passed 5-0 with 2 absences. Then we discussed Transco, and we went over many documents, and we adjourned the meeting around 9:10. I need a motion to accept the minutes. Motion made by Member Bolano, seconded by Member Loberdier. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion passes 5-0 with 2 absences. All right, now on to old business. NY Transco, Dover Electric Substation. All right, so last time we read through the Part 2 and Part 3 of the negative declaration. One addition to the negative declaration narrative is this paragraph here. It's on page 11 of the document. So I'll read that now. It should also be noted that as part of construction, the applicant intends to excavate to bedrock, removing all overburdened soil within the anticipated area of disturbance. Through the SIR, AKRF recommended that the applicant prepare a soil materials management plan, or SMMP, to be implemented during earthwork to identify the proper handling, stockpiling, characterization, and off-site disposal of all excavated material. The SMMP would also establish contingency measures in the event that unknown tanks or unknown pockets of contamination are encountered during the site's redevelopment. The applicant submitted an environmental management plan, or EMP, to serve as the SMMP dated March 2024 and prepared by TRC. The EMP documents potential areas of concern, management of excavated soil, dewatering requirements if necessary, implementation of stormwater protection, and site management activities to be performed at the site. The EMP is intended to satisfy the appropriate local, state, and federal regulatory requirements during implementation of the site's construction activities. On May 29, 2024, the Planning Board's consultants, AKRF, TE, and the town engineer issued a joint memorandum with comments and recommendations to be incorporated by the applicant into a revised final EMP/SMMP. As a condition of any future approval of the proposed project, the Planning Board will require that the applicant revise the document to address these comments and resubmit a final version to the town. Okay. And that's the only thing that was...
Yeah, so...
Please discuss that.
As is mentioned here, last week we issued a technical memo with comments. It was a joint memo. It was on AKRF letterhead, but it was from AKRF, Scott Taylor, and Joe Berger. All of the comments collectively were sent to the applicant and this board. And this week we received a revised version of that. One of the main things we asked is that they call it an SMMP, not an EMP, and they've done that. They also said that they addressed all the comments. We haven't had a chance to go through it fully, but there is a resolution before you tonight to have all those comments be addressed and resubmitted as a condition of approval. So we could take our time to take a look at those responses and have something back in writing to the board that they've satisfied those comments, should you move forward tonight with that resolution.
Okay. All right, thank you. Did you want to add anything further?
Yeah, well, just the negative declaration that you had open there, it was gone through since last meeting. That was the only major change that was made. The rest of it was just correcting any typos or formatting issues that we encountered as you read through it last meeting. There's also a header that was added to the top of each page. Just thought that was important to add. And again, everything that's new is in red. It's dated today's date. The Part 2 and Part 3 EAF were also sent back in, but you went through those last meeting. Nothing changed except the date at the top and on the signature page.
Okay.
For Part 3.
All right.
Chairman?
Yes.
Just going back to the management plan, the soils management plan, before we move away from it, I just want to make sure that the board members didn't have any extra comments that weren't already included in the technical memo from AKRF on the plan that should be incorporated into the memo.
Any plan members have any additional comments?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Polidoro, anything further since you have the
That's it.
microphone? Okay. Engineer Berger?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, any members of the planning board have anything else they want to discuss with respect to this project at this time? All right. All right, resolution affirming prior secret determination of significance and regranting special use permit, site plan, and erosion sediment control permit approval, Transco substation. Okay. Let's try that again. Resolution reaffirming prior secret determination of significance and regranting special use permit, site plan, and erosion sediment control permit approval, Transco substation. Whereas the applicant, New York Transco LLC, the applicant has submitted an application for a site plan, special use permit, and erosion sediment control permit approval to construct an electric substation with transformers and current equipment, collectively known as the project, on property located at 2238 New York State Route 22, identified as tax parcel number 7061-00-698-172, known as a property or site, in the CO zoning district. And whereas the public utility facilities, facility uses are permitted in the CO zoning district, subject to site plan and special use permit approval. And whereas the project is depicted on a site plan entitled Dover Station, prepared by Power Engineers, dated June 22nd, 2021, last revised August 31, 2022, sheets DVB-E0-101, BS-1, DVB-E1-101, DVB-E1-102, DVB-C1-101, DVB-C1-102, DVB-C1-103, DVB-C1-104, DVB-C1-112, DVB-C1-113, DVB-C1-114, DVB-C1-115, DVB-C1-120, DVB-E2-110, DVB-E2-111, and DVB-E7-101, collectively known as the site plan set. And whereas by letter dated November 10, 2021, the town building inspector determined that certain features of the project that exceeded dimensional limitations in the town zoning law were permitted because such features were required by applicable state and federal law, including the 2014 New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code, including a requirement for a minimum of 9-foot fencing around the substations with 1 additional foot of barbed wire, and transmission poles and supports that exceed the town's height limit of 35 feet. And whereas the applicant has submitted a full environmental assessment form, or EAF, dated September 28, 2021, revised December 3, 2021, pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, or SEQRA, and whereas on October 18, 2021, the Planning Board classified the project as a major project and as an unlisted action under SEQRA, and circulated its intent to serve as lead agency in a coordinated review of the project, to which no other agency objected. And whereas involved and interested agencies in the SEQR process, including the Town of Dover Highway Department, Dutchess County Department of Public Works, or DPW, New York State Department of Transportation, or NYSDOT, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, or the NYSDEC, the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, or also known as OPRHP, New York State Public Service Commission, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, or USACE, and the J.H. Ketchum Hose Company. I think. And whereas the project was referred to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development pursuant to Section 239-M of the General Municipal Law, which responded on November 3, 2021, that it was a matter of local concern, ZR 21-320. And whereas on October 30, 2021, members of the Planning Board conducted a site walk of the property to review existing conditions of the property and the adjoining areas. And whereas the project is located within 500 feet of New York State Route 22 and within the vicinity of an existing Con Edison right-of-way with existing utility towers, and whereas the project is located within or adjacent to the Great Swamp Critical Environmental Area, or CEA, and the Planning Board has conducted its review with consideration of the potential impacts of the characteristics and qualities which warranted the area's designation as a CEA, and whereas the project does not seek a payment in lieu of taxes or pilot agreement, and the implications of a pilot were not considered as part of this board's analysis of potential community-wide impacts, and any further application for a pilot would require a supplemental secret review or reopening of the secret review by the Planning Board. And whereas a duly noticed public hearing on the project was opened on September 19, 2022, and continued through January 23, 2023, with written public comments accepted until February 1, 2023, during which time the public had the opportunity to testify and provide written comments to the Planning Board for the Planning Board's consideration. And whereas on February 6, 2023, the Planning Board adopted a secret determination of significance, a negative declaration, determining that the project as proposed would not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts, and that a draft environmental impact statement would not be prepared, known as the negative declaration. And whereas on February 6, 2023, after adopting the negative declaration, the Planning Board granted special use permit, site plan, and erosion sediment control permit approval to the project. And whereas an Article 78 proceeding was filed in the Dutchess County Supreme Court, index number 2023-50796, to annul the negative declaration. And whereas on August 24, 2023, the Dutchess County Supreme Court issued a decision and order which vacated and annulled the negative declaration and remanded the matter to the Planning Board to take a hard look at the areas of environmental concern discussed in the decision and order, reconsidering whether to issue a positive or negative declaration on the project. And whereas after the decision and order, the applicant submitted a scope of work for additional soil and groundwater investigation to the Planning Board for review. And whereas in light of the court's decision and order, the Planning Board engaged its independent consultant, AKRF Incorporated, to review the subsurface investigations prepared by the applicant's consultant, TRC, and the proposed scope of work, and determined that to have AKRF prepare its own scope of work for additional soil and groundwater investigation at the site. And whereas in addition to engaging AKRF, the Planning Board engaged Scott Taylor, PG number 1088 of Tailored Environment Incorporated, also known as TE, to peer review AKRF's work. And whereas after review of a draft scope of work first submitted by AKRF to the Planning Board on December 18, 2023, and discussed among the Board, TE, and AKRF during the Planning Board's regular meeting of December 18, 2023, the scope was finalized and resubmitted to the Planning Board on January 3, 2024. And whereas between January 30, 2024 and February 1st, 2024, AKRF directed a subsurface investigation at the site that included the excavation of 17 test pits and the collection of 17 soil samples, one from each test pit, and 2 groundwater samples, one from each of the 2 existing monitoring wells, for a laboratory analysis, including a comparison of all samples collected to the 6 NYCRR Part 375-6.8, subsection B, Residential and Protection of Groundwater Soil Cleanup Objectives, or SCOs, and the New York State DEC Ambient Water Quality Standards and Guidance Values, or AWQ SGVs. And whereas the investigation included a sampling plan that achieved coverage over the full extent of the anticipated limits of disturbance for the project, plus 3 down gradient locations, test pits TP10, TP12, and TP13, where surface water would have the potential to discharge onto the south adjacent property containing a portion of the Great Swamp. And whereas on March 1, 2024, AKRF submitted to the Planning Board and TE a draft of the Subsurface Investigation Report, or SIR, documenting the work completed between January 30th, 2024 and February 1st, 2024, and summarizing the laboratory results of all soil and groundwater samples taken. Taken from the site. And whereas the results of AKRF's 2024 subsurface investigation concluded that the laboratory results were consistent with previous investigations, which identified residual compounds being present in shallow soil due to the historic use as a vehicle scrapyard and/or background conditions. The detections were not indicative of a release of contamination, and there was no evidence of site conditions that would require New York State DEC spill reporting or be subject to remediation-related New York State DEC enforcement action. And whereas pursuant to the court's decision and order, the Planning Board sought additional guidance from New York State DEC, which responded on April 1, 2024, stating that the soil cleanup objectives, or SCOs, found at 6 NYC RR subpart 375-6, quote, are used when a site is part of a remedial program administered by New York State DEC, such as the Brownfield Cleanup Program or State Superfund Program. This property is not part of a New York State DEC remedial program referenced above, and therefore the SCOs do not apply. Based on the information provided, New York State DEC does not have jurisdiction to require the applicant of any particular SCOs at this time. New York State DEC has no other comments, end quote. And whereas TE agreed with the conclusions in AKRF's March 1, 2024 SIR, but requested that an additional analysis of the TP1 soil sample for cadmium and copper be completed following a synthetic precipitation leaching procedure, or SPLP, to help, quote, understand the mobility of these metals in the environment, end quote. And whereas on March 21, 2024, AKRF submitted to the Planning Board a revised SIR, which was unchanged with the exception of the additional SPLP analysis of the TP1 soil sample requested by TE. The results of the SPLP analysis support the conclusion that the detected metals are not anticipated to migrate at a level that would impact groundwater. And whereas after the March 21, 2024 SIR was made available for public review, the Planning Board held 2 additional public hearings on the project on April 1, 2024 and April 15, 2024, and accepted written comments until the close of the hearing on April 15, 2024. And whereas the public comments were discussed during the meeting and addressed in a written response to comments memorandum prepared by AKRF dated May 16, 2024, and corrected on May 20, 2024. And whereas TE issued a memorandum agreeing with the conclusions in AKRF's response to comments memorandum on May 20, 2024, and whereas there is an extensive environmental record before the Planning Board, including reports prepared by the applicant's consultants, the board's consultants, and public testimony, and whereas the Planning Board has considered the criteria contained in 6 NYCRR 6.17.7 Parts 2 and 3 of the EAF, and thoroughly analyzed all identified relevant areas of environmental concern as set forth in the narrative accompanying Part 3 of the EAF. Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Board hereby reaffirms its secret findings issued on February 6, 2023, that the project will not have a significant impact from a substantial adverse change in air quality, traffic, noise, solid waste production, potential for flooding, erosion or drainage problems, removal or destruction of large quantities of flora and fauna, substantial interference with the movement of any resident or migratory fish or wildlife species, impacts on a significant habitat area, substantial adverse impacts on a threatened or endangered species or of animal or plant, or the habitat of such species, or other significant adverse impacts to natural resources, creation of a material conflict with the community's current plans or goals as officially approved or adopted, the impairment of the character or quality of important historical, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources, or of existing community or neighborhood character. A major change in the use of either the quantity or type of energy, a substantial change in the use or intensity of use of land, including agricultural, open space, or recreational resources, or in its capacity to support existing uses. Encouragement of large number of people to a place or places compared to the number of people who would come absent such action, and creation of a material demand for other actions that would result in one of the above consequences. And be it further resolved that as to the potential impacts from a substantial adverse change in ground and surface water quality and quantity, potential for leaching, the impairment of the environmental characteristics of a critical environmental area, and the creation of a hazard to human health, the Planning Board hereby reaffirms its prior findings issued on February 6, 2023, and adopts the supplementary findings set forth in quote-unquote red throughout the narrative accompanying Part 3 of the EAF, and adopts a negative declaration finding that the project as proposed will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts, and that a draft environmental impact statement will not be prepared. Be it further resolved that the Planning Board makes the following findings pursuant to Section 145-63B of the zoning law. 1, the project will comply with all land use district, overlay district, and other specific requirements of the zoning law and other applicable local laws and regulations, and will be consistent with the purposes of the zoning law and the land use district in which it is located. The site is 16.3 acres and zoned in the town's commercial/industrial/office mixed use or CO zoning district. The purpose of the CO district is to, among other things, quote, allow areas for light industrial facilities. That's from 145-8, subsection A, subsection 7 of the zoning law. The project, a public utility facility, is a permitted use in the district through a special use permit from the Planning Board and does not require any area variances. 2, the project will not result in excessive off-premises noise, dust, odors, solid waste, or glare, or create any public or private nuisances. As to sound, the Planning Board reviewed a sound assessment report prepared by Epsilon Associates. The report concludes that maximum sound levels from the project will comply with the nighttime limit of 50 dBA at the property line set forth in the Town of Dover Code and meet applicable New York State DEC noise guidelines. The sound assessment was reviewed and evaluated multiple times by the town's consultants, who also confirmed that, based on the studies completed to satisfy SECRA, neither New York State DEC impact thresholds nor the town property line noise level limits would be exceeded under operational conditions. Based on our review of the modeled octave band sound levels, the project will also comply with the town's guideline of avoiding disharmony with the character of the surrounding area under the modeled conditions. The board also considered sound during construction and finds that such sound is temporary and is anticipated to take approximately 12 months. Minor temporary increases in sound may occur during construction, which are typical of any project in the town. The board is also requiring a post-construction sound test to confirm that the project as constructed will operate within the town's sound limits. In coordination with the town engineer, the applicant has committed to conduct sound testing on the site after completion of construction during the commissioning stage of the project. Sound test measurement locations shall include the 4 receptor locations at the site property lines that are identified in the Epsilon report. The town engineer may require the applicant to include in the test no more than 4 additional measurement locations at the site property lines. If non-compliance with the town code is observed, the applicant shall coordinate with the town engineer to evaluate potential corrective measures to ensure no significant noise impacts to the community. Under lighting and glare, the project will not utilize exterior lighting during nighttime hours under normal operations. Lighting at night will only occur for safety and security purposes or required maintenance visits. Security and emergency light fixtures and photometric analysis are identified on the site plan set. The project will not cause illumination beyond the boundaries of the site in excess of 0.5 foot candles. Illumination along all property lines of the site will be 0.0 foot candles. Security and emergency lighting will be controlled from 2 3-way switches, one located at the main entrance gate and one located in the control unit. No glare is expected from the proposed equipment, but nonetheless, the facility will be substantially buffered from neighboring properties and public roads through robust landscaping as shown on the landscaping plan. Under dust, odors, or solid waste, the project is an unoccupied public utility facility. It will not be staffed and will not produce odors or solid waste. Project operations will not produce any dust, and construction debris and construction dust, if any, will be temporary, and control measures will be implemented, such as stabilized points of entry to prevent dust and mud from being carried off-site, as well as using water for dust control as appropriate. The project will not result in any public or private nuisance from soil or water contamination, which is discussed extensively in the March 21, 2024 SIR prepared by AKRF, the May 20, 2024 response to public comments memorandum prepared by AKRF, and in Part 3 of the EAF. Number 3, the project will not cause significant traffic congestion, impair pedestrian safety, or overload existing roads, considering current width, surfacing, and condition, and any improvements proposed to be made to them by the applicant. The project is an unoccupied public utility facility that will not produce or result in additional traffic to the site or the town once constructed. The substation will be monitored remotely for security and maintenance purposes. It is expected that routine security and maintenance visits will occur 2 to 5 times per month. The project is located on a New York State highway, Route 22, which will not be overloaded by the security and maintenance visits. The project has referred to New York State DOT, which did not express any concerns about the project, including the utility work permitting for activities affecting the state highway. The applicant has also coordinated with the Dutchess County DPW regarding work to be conducted on the county highway. During construction, temporary construction entrances will be located on New York State Route 22 and County Route 26, Cricket Hill Road. Trucks entering either of these temporary entrances during construction will be required to originate from the northbound or southbound lanes of New York State Route 22. Trucks exiting either of these temporary entrances during construction will be prohibited from traveling east beyond the County Route 26 or Cricket Hill Road construction entrance. Number 4, the project will be accessible to fire, police, and emergency vehicles. The project will have a single permanent access drive from New York State Route 22 into the site, approximately 733 feet south of the County Route 26 or Cricket Hill Road intersection, and will be accessible by emergency vehicles. The J.H. Ketchum Hose Company has reviewed plans for the project and offered comments which the applicant has addressed. The project does not propose a payment in lieu of taxes or pilot agreement, and therefore the project will contribute to community emergency services and will not overburden such services. 5, the project will not overload any public water, drainage, or sewer system or any other municipal facility. The project is an unmanned substation and will not create new demand for water or produce wastewater. Stormwater will be treated on site. A stormwater pollution prevention plan, or SWPPP or SWIP, has been prepared in accordance with GP 0-20-001, reviewed by the Planning Board engineer, and will be filed with the New York State DEC.
That should have been updated. Did I get the old one?
6, the project will not materially degrade any water course or other natural resource or ecosystem or endanger the water quality of an aquifer. The site plan contains state and federal wetlands and is adjacent to the Great Swamp, a critical environmental area. It is also located within the Aquifer Overlay District. No disturbance to state-regulated wetlands, 100-foot wetland adjacent areas, or water bodies is proposed. The applicant consulted with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the 2 small isolated federal wetlands totaling 0.04 acres with no inlet or outlet that are proposed to be filled as part of the project's construction. The site and construction methodologies were reviewed by the New York State DEC, the town engineer, and Terracon, a national professional geotechnical, environmental, and construction materials engineering and testing firm. The hydrogeological analysis determined that, quote, The planned area of disturbance on the project site is small relative to the scale of the overall system which feeds water into the Great Swamp. Accordingly, completion of the Dover Station project is not expected to have an adverse or measurable impact on aquifers of the quantity and quality of water which enters the system for the Great Swamp. New York State DEC's Division of Fish and Wildlife confirmed that the applicant is proposing appropriate measures as part of the project to avoid potential changes to the chemistry, quality, and quantity of surface and groundwater entering the adjacent wetland. New York State DEC determination dated July 15, 2022. On March 3, 2022, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers issued a no permit required determination for the two small isolated federal wetlands proposed to be filled, and the site is also not located within or near a 100-year or 500-year floodplain. Between January 30, 2024 and February 1, 2024, AKRF directed an additional subsurface investigation at the site that included the excavation of 17 test pits and the collection of 17 soil samples, one from each test pit, and 2 groundwater samples, one from each of the 2 existing monitoring wells for laboratory analysis. In addition to the representative from AKRF conducting the investigation was overseen by the town engineer and representatives from TE, the applicant, and TRC, an environmental consultant for the applicant. TRC collected split samples on behalf of the applicant for independent laboratory analysis. The investigation included a sampling plan that achieved coverage over the full extent of the anticipated limits of disturbance for the project, plus 3 downgrading locations, test pits, TP10, TP12, and TP13, where surface water would have the potential to discharge onto the south adjacent property containing a portion of the Great Swamp. On March 1, 2024, AKRF submitted to the Planning Board and TE a draft of the Subsurface Investigation Report, or SIR, documenting the work completed between January 30th, 2024 and February 1st, 2024, and summarizing the laboratory results of all soil and groundwater samples taken from the site. The SIR documented that subsurface materials at the site consisted of approximately 6 inches to 2 feet of dark brown topsoil with intertwined roots and organics, underlain by up to 4.5 feet of brown to light brown sand with a varying mixture of silt, clay, and gravel. All this is overburdened glacial deposits. A dolomitic marble bedrock was encountered in each test pit at depths ranging from 1.25 feet to 5.25 feet below ground surface. No evidence of contamination, examples being staining or petroleum or solvent-like odors, were observed, and no organic vapors were detected while screening the soil with a photoionization detector, or PID, during logging and sampling. Overburdened groundwater, which is saturated soil above bedrock, was not observed in the test pits. Laboratory analysis of the soil samples identified that a site-related volatile organic compound, or VOC, was detected in one of the 17 samples, and a semi-volatile organic compound, or SVOC, were detected in the soil samples at concentrations below the New York State DEC Residential Use and Protection of Groundwater SEOs. 1 polychlorinated biphenyl, or PCB, compound was detected in one of the 17 samples, with the total PCB concentration being below the Residential and Protection of Groundwater SEOs, and pesticides were not detected in any of the soil samples. The anticipated suite of naturally occurring metals was detected in the soil samples. Cadmium and or copper were detected in 3 of the 17 soil samples, test pits TP1, TP5, and TP15, at concentrations that exceeded the residential SEOs, but were well below the protection of groundwater SEOs. The cadmium detections were consistent with rural background concentrations as determined by New York State DEC and New York State Department of Health, or NYSDOH, Rural Soil Survey. And there's a link to a PDF there. The copper detections in 2 soil samples were considered to be associated with past vehicle scrapping, where electrical wire and radiators were removed for reclamation purposes. No VOCs, SVOCs, PCBs, or pesticides were detected in the groundwater samples. 5 metals, barium, copper, lead, manganese, and/or zinc were detected in the groundwater samples at concentrations well below the New York State DEC ambient water quality standards and guidance values, or AWQ SGVs. No other metal compounds were detected in the groundwater samples. AKRF's March 1, 2024 SIR was reviewed by TE, and in a letter from TE to the Planning Board dated March 8, 2024, it was stated that, quote, TE observed that AKRF staff followed the approved subsurface investigation scope of work. TE observed that AKRF staff followed an industry and regulatory standards while completing the subsurface investigation, end quote. The March 8, 2024 TE letter included two comments. First, it was noted by TE that 2-butanone detected in TP17, quote, may be attributable to natural processes, and TE agrees that this chemical was not released during historic land use, end quote. Second, it was requested that an additional analysis of the TP1 soil sample for cadmium and copper be completed following a synthetic precipitation leaching procedure, or SPLP, to help, quote, understand the mobility of these metals in the environment. On March 21, 2024, AKRF submitted to the Planning Board a revised SIR, which was unchanged with the exception of the additional SPLP analysis of the TP1 soil sample requested by TE. The soil sample from TP1, which contained the highest concentrations of cadmium and copper, was tested for leachable metals using SPLP to determine the potential for the metals to, quote-unquote, leach from soil during precipitation events into solution, eventually into groundwater. As presented in the SPLP results, leachable cadmium was detected at a concentration of 0.96 J micrograms per liter, or parts per billion, and leachable copper was detected at 8.4 parts per billion. The quote-unquote J flag with the cadmium result indicates an estimated concentration that was lower than the reporting limit of the laboratory method. New York State DEC has not promulgated criteria or guidance values for SPLP results. An established process for understanding SPLP results includes comparison to 10 times the value of the New York State DEC AWQ SGVs, which is based on additional dilution that would take place in groundwater or surface water as part of the natural leaching process. The SPLP results were not only below the 10 times value, but they are below the direct AWQ SGVs for cadmium, which is 50 parts per billion, and copper, 200 parts per billion, even without the dilution. As mentioned in the summary above, the total cadmium and total copper soil results were also well below their respective protection of groundwater SEOs. The SPLP results support the conclusion that the detected metals are not anticipated to migrate at a level that would impact groundwater. AKRF's March 21, 2024 SIR, including the requested SPLP analysis, was reviewed by TE. In a letter from TE to the Planning Board dated March 26, 2024, TE concurred with AKRF's assessment of the requested SPLP analysis. The results of AKRF's 2024 SIR concluded that the laboratory results were consistent with previous investigations, which identified residual compounds being present in shallow soil due to the historic use as a vehicle scrapyard and/or background conditions. The detections were not indicative of a release of contamination, and there was no evidence of site conditions that would require New York State DEC spill reporting or be subject to remediation-related New York State DEC enforcement action. Based on the soil and groundwater sampling information provided to the Planning Board as part of the secret record, it can be reasonably concluded that the site is not contaminated currently, and that construction of the project in accordance with the measures proposed to address construction-related erosion and sedimentation required through Town Code Chapter 65 would serve to preclude any significant impacts related to any hazardous materials leaving the site during construction. In connection with the project, the Planning Board is requiring the applicant to remove certain existing surface debris in specific designated locations outside of the planned area of disturbance for the project on the site, which removal has already occurred. The applicant worked with the New York State DEC and obtained a determination from the New York State DEC to perform certain work in a manner that will not cause any adverse environmental impacts To the extent that such debris was the source of any pollutants entering the Great Swamp, the removal of the debris could improve water quality. Under natural resources and ecosystem, the site was identified as potentially containing habitat for several state and federally listed threatened, endangered, or special concern species, including Indiana bat, bog turtle, timber rattlesnake, fairy wand, and New England cottontail. To avoid potential impacts to Indiana bat, which have not been observed on site, the applicant will limit tree clearing on the site to the period between October 1 through March 31. While potential bog turtle habitat was not observed on the site, the applicant has coordinated with New York State DEC to provide appropriate measures to protect bog turtles, including turtle exclusion fencing and an education and encounter plan. The closest timber rattlesnake den in the vicinity of the site is located west of New York State Route 22, and this road provides a significant enough barrier that it would make it unlikely for timber rattlesnakes to be using the site. However, the applicant has prepared an education encounter plan for a timber rattlesnake if needed during construction, in addition to that prepared for bog turtle. Based on surveys conducted by the applicant and coordination with New York State DEC, it was determined that the site does not contain fairy wand or habitat for the the New England cottontail. Following several rounds of coordination and review with the planning board's consultants and New York State DEC, New York State DEC Division of Fish and Wildlife confirmed via email on January 15, 2022, that with inclusion of measures proposed by the applicant as part of the project and memorialized in the site plan set, the project will, quote, avoid and or minimize any direct impacts to individual bog turtles and avoid potential changes to the chemistry, quality, and quantity of surface and groundwater entering the adjacent wetland, and further that the project does not require a Part 182 incidental take permit for any state-listed species. Although there is no federal nexus, or such as funding or permitting associated with the project, the applicant coordinated with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, or USFWS. In a letter dated December 27, 2022, USFWS indicated that based on the measures noted above, no take of Indiana bat or bog turtle would occur with the project, and no further coordination with USFWS is required for the project. Based on the soil and groundwater sampling information provided to the planning board as part of the SEQR record, it can be reasonably concluded that the site is not contaminated currently, and that construction of the project in accordance with the measures proposed to address construction-related erosion sedimentation required through Town Code Chapter 65 would serve to preclude any significant impacts related to any hazardous materials leaving the site during construction, and therefore no impacts to natural resources or ecosystems. Under water quality of an aquifer, the project does not conflict with the Aquifer Overlay District provisions or its intent, and that the project does not present a risk to the quality of town water supplies or groundwater resources. The site is not located near a public water system wellhead. The project does not draw water supply and does not produce wastewater. Agricultural use is not proposed. No above ground or underground petroleum storage tanks are proposed. The project does not involve the use of a public water supply system or the installation of a new on-site wastewater treatment system, also known as a septic system. The project includes secondary containment features below and around the transformers proposed on the site. The applicant has prepared a SWIP and an erosion and sediment control, or ESC, plan to the satisfaction of the town engineer. The SWIP shows that the project will result in a reduction in peak stormwater runoff rate for each drainage area for all designed storms. Erosion and sediment control measures will be implemented in accordance with GP-0-20-001 and Chapter 65 of the Town Code. Environmental professionals completed surface and subsurface investigations, such as soil and groundwater testing, in compliance with state and federal guidance and standards. Blasting of bedrock on a limited extent of the site will occur within 1,500 feet of a residence and a critical environmental area, the Great Swamp. Blasting will be temporary and is expected to occur at a point within the site preparation phase of the project's construction, a phase that in total will last approximately 4 months. All blasting will be in accordance with the town building code requirements, Town Code, Chapter 69, and will require a permit from the town. It should also be noted that as part of construction, the applicant intends to excavate to bedrock, removing all overburdened soil within the anticipated area of disturbance. Through the March 21, 2024 SIR, AKRF recommended that the applicant prepare a soil materials management plan, or SMMP, to be implemented during earthwork to identify the proper handling, stockpiling, characterization, and off-site disposal of all excavated material. The SMMP would also establish contingency measures in the event that unknown tanks or unknown pockets of contamination are encountered during the site's redevelopment. The applicant submitted an environmental management plan, or EMP, to serve as the SMMP, dated March 2024 and prepared by TRC. The EMP documents potential areas of concern, management of excavated soils, dewatering requirements if necessary, implementation of stormwater protection, and site management activities performed at the site. The EMP is intended to satisfy the appropriate local, state, and federal regulatory requirements during implementation of the site's construction activities. On May 29, 2024, the Planning Board's consultants, AKRF, TE, and the town engineer issued a joint memorandum with comments and recommendations to be incorporated by the applicant into a revised or final EMP slash SMMP. The project will be suitable for the property on which it is proposed, concerning the property's size, location, topography, vegetation, soils, natural habitat, and hydrology, and, if appropriate, its ability to be buffered or screened from neighboring properties and public roads. The project site is 16.3 acres in the CO district, in which utility facilities are a permitted use, and is located on and accessed by New York State Route 22, a state highway. The project proposes substantial landscape buffers along public roads and neighboring properties, including over 250 new planting and mature being 20 feet tall, evergreens along New York State Route 22 and County Route 26, also known as Cricket Hill Road. As described within the Visual Impact Assessment, or VIA, report, the project has minimal visibility and will not cause an adverse visual impact or conflict with New York State DEC's visual policy. The project leaves the northeastern corner of the site largely undisturbed and proposes a landscaped buffer along the County Route 26 Cricket Hill Road frontage, including the preservation of existing vegetation. This vegetation buffer will be bolstered by the proposed new plantings along the northern and western properties of the site. Number 8, the project will be subject to such conditions on operation, design, and layout of structures and provision of buffer areas as may be necessary to ensure compatibility with surrounding uses and to protect the natural, historic, and scenic resources of the town. As set forth in paragraph 7 above, the project includes significant plantings along New York State Route 22 and County Route 26, also known as Cricket Hill Road, to buffer the project from public view. According to the VIA, only 1.58% of the 3-mile study area will theoretically contain a view of the proposed project, and 22% of that is from the Con Edison right-of-way. Further, the VIA concludes that, quote, in the limited locations in the study area where the Dover Station project may be visible, it would be observed in conjunction with existing utility infrastructures and does not alter the character of the community. Number 9, the project will be consistent with the goal of buffering non-residential uses that are incompatible with residential use. The board does not find that the unoccupied substation is compatible with residential use. Nonetheless, the applicant has provided significant landscaping to buffer the non-residential use. Number 10, the project will not adversely affect the availability of affordable housing within the town. 11, the project will comply with all applicable site plan criteria. 12, the project is not within a residential district. Be it further resolved that the planning board hereby grants site plan approval to the project in accordance with the site plan set and grants special use permit approval for a public utility facility to the applicant and authorizes the chair or his authorized designee to sign the site plan set after compliance with the following conditions. 1, payment of all fees and escrow. 2, approval by the attorney to the planning board and town attorney of the decommissioning agreement and evidence of recordation of same with the Dutchess County Clerk. 3, approval by the town engineer, planner, and planning board attorney of post-construction noise testing protocols. 4, revision of the site plan set to include a new plan sheet depicting the map of the debris removal within state-regulated wetland areas and debris removal protocols approved by the New York State DEC as per Exhibit B of the April 28, 2022 applicant submission, with a note that all debris removal will be removed prior to the issuance of a certificate of completion for the project to the approval of the town engineer. Revision of the title sheet and sheet DVB-C1-104 of the site plan set to include the following note: all construction traffic shall enter Route 26 or Cricket Hill Road from New York State Route 22. Number 6, revision of sheet DVB-C1-104 to require the installation of a sign prohibiting truck traffic from traveling east beyond the County Route 26 or Cricket Hill Road construction entrance. Specification for such sign shall be approved by the town engineer. 7, submission of an affidavit by the applicant that a payment in lieu of tax agreement will not be sought within 10 years, or if so, that applicant will resubmit to the Town of Dover Planning Board for a modified seeker evaluation. 8, revision of the applicant's March 2024 environmental management plan to address the comments raised in the May 29, 2024 memo from AKRF, Berger Engineering and Surveying, and Tailored Environment Incorporated, and written approval of same from AKRF, Berger Engineering and Surveying, and Tailored Environment Incorporated. Be it further resolved that the planning board hereby grants the applicant an erosion sediment control permit for disturbance as shown on the site plan set, subject to the following conditions. 1, submission of $7,500 to be placed into escrow to cover the cost of site plan inspections by the planning board engineer. 2, submission of a performance guarantee in the amount of $75,000 in form, substance, and matter of execution satisfactory to the town attorney. Be it further resolved that before the authorized official may issue a certificate of compliance, the planning board engineer shall provide the authorized official with a written statement indicating that all work authorized in the permit has been completed in accordance with the approved permit, and that all debris removal, as shown on the approved debris removal plan sheet outside of the planned area of disturbance, has occurred. Okay. This resolution is being offered by
So moved.
Councilman, sorry, not Councilman.
You can call me that.
Nazar.
I've been called worse.
Member Sador, seconded by
Second.
Member Villano. Discussion.
Brian, can you go up to the sentence about the sign? Oh, the number 6.
6.
That doesn't mean truck traffic, that just means truck traffic from the construction.
From the construction site, yeah.
There's already a sign there for truck traffic.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
So no trucks can go there.
They go all the way,
Yeah,
but there is
They
a
still-
sign.
Yeah, no,
I mean, I was just thinking.
There is a county sign that says local delivery only.
early on in the project, it was brought up that the project is mainly on New York State Route 22. There's also going to be a construction entrance on Cricket Hill Road, but, out of concern for, everyone who lives on Cricket Hill Road and has to travel Cricket Hill Road, that trucks coming to and from the site would not traverse Cricket Hill Road, except for that section to get from New York State Route 22 to Cricket Hill Road. So that's why earlier in the resolution, it talks about that, or in the narrative, that traffic will only be coming from up, the northern and southern direction of New York State Route 22. Is there anything further, Member Robadier?
No, I just wanted to make sure we weren't forgetting people
No.
getting their deliveries.
No, I mean, again. All right. Sador? Member Palmer? Okay. Anything further, Attorney Polidoro, or Planner Warner, or Engineer Berger?
No.
Okay. All right. I have no further comments at this time. Resolution reaffirming prior secret determination of significance and regranting special use permit, site plan, and erosion sediment control permit approval for a Transco substation. Secretary, please call the roll.
Member Valano,
Aye.
Member Sudor,
Aye.
Member Palmer,
Aye.
Member LaRobodiere,
Aye.
Chairman Curtin.
Aye. This resolution is adopted 5-0 with 2 absences. Congratulations. All right, let me make sure I save that. There was some minor edits along the way as I was reading it, so I saved it along the way, and the final document is this one right here, which I'll just minimize right now.
It was the
Right?
ink after James.
All right, so nothing further with that application, and no further business before the planning board. Our next scheduled meeting is June 17, 2024, the deadline for which has passed on May 29th. We did receive an application, and then also we are likely going to continue discussing the Sherman Hill Road two-family project. And then our meeting that's scheduled after that is for July 1st, 2024, with a deadline of June 12th. Okay, is there any further business for this planning board? Seeing no further business, I'll make a motion to adjourn, seconded by Member Robadier. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned.
Excellent.
Looks like I might get